fellow Toastmasters and guests. I was in the first grade and my teacher phoned home and she's speaking to my mother and she says, "Could you tell Myles to please stop telling all the kids that his leg is made from wood?" And what's crazy about this story is that for 3 years of my life, I truly believed this. I went to the hospital when I was 3 years old with an infection on my leg called Helix-Schoenlein purpura, which is basically a fancy way of saying I had lumps on my leg. Now, I went to the hospital at about midnight, and at that age, I most certainly fell asleep when I was there, and I guess after watching Pinocchio, I had dreamed that a surgical procedure happened on my leg, and it was replaced with wood. Strangest thing, 3 years later, my family finally had to say, "Myles, this is no longer a joke." I didn't think it was a joke at the time, of course. It's quite upsetting, really. So my name is Myles Drake. I'm 25 years old. I'm from Grimsby, Ontario, and I've been living in Vermont now for just about a year. So when I was young, I was obsessed with remote control cars. I absolutely loved and I was inspired by these vehicles. They're able to move from my hand's input. I was like, almost, is that a ghost controlling it? It was fascinating. And what I really liked about them was how they worked, and what I really disliked the most was when they didn't work. But luckily for me, 4 of my uncles were automotive mechanics, so whenever my remote control car would break, I'd simply take it to them and say, "Could you fix this?" And they'd say, "Why, of course I can." And they'd give it back to me and it would work again. So I didn't think of a mechanic as somebody that worked on cars. I thought of my uncles as magicians. And they were amazing. And I thought it's some kind of black magic that for them to know the internal workings. I pictured just this array of wires and they just knew which ones to connect, or something to that extent. And so when I was younger, all of my uncles were mechanics. One of them had a dirt bike on his farm. And when his son was 3 years old, his son rode around the field with this dirt bike that had training wheels. I thought, that's so cool. Why can't I do that? So I said, "Dad, can I get a dirt bike?" And he said, "No." I said, okay. And he said, "We don't have a farm. You don't have anywhere to ride it. So you can't get a dirt bike." And I said, okay. So another one of my uncles, yes, I have a lot of uncles, 31 first cousins, in fact. So another one of my uncles, he buys a motor scooter. It's a Honda motor scooter. And I'm 10 years old at the time, and he says, "Myles, would you like to drive it?" And I looked up at my dad and I said, "Dad, can I drive it?" And at that point he made the worst decision of his life, and he said, "Yes, you can. What's the worst that could happen?" And so I got to ride the scooter for about 30 seconds, and at that age, every second becomes 1 month of the desire to be able to own one. So for the next 29 months or so, I said, "Dad, can I get a dirt bike?" And he said, "No." But on that 30th month, roughly, it was just over 2 years later, I'd saved up the money myself to buy my own dirt bike, and at that point I became absolutely obsessed. And so I would come home every day after school and I would look at the bike and I would look inside the motor and be like, what is possibly going on? I pictured that array of wires still. And I broke it a couple of times, but luckily I had these family members that were able to support me. And so every day after school I would come home and I would ride that bike until dark. There was a construction site not too far down the road, and I would come home at dark, and eventually my friends started getting dirt bikes, and we ended up going to this motocross track one day, and I remember it so vividly. There were these huge jumps, and I was like, "Oh man, these are so awesome." Now I didn't do a single one, but I got about 3 inches of air. But when you're that age, 3 inches is about 30 feet, right? So I came back home and I pointed to my minivan and I said, "Dad, I can jump over that." And he was like, "Wow." So he just thought, my son must be really good. And it took a long time, but I decided that I wanted to become a professional motocross racer, and that was my dream, that was my goal. And I really did everything that I felt I could to do it. But no matter how much desire somebody has with motocross racers especially, it's not always about desire. Sometimes your body just can't handle the beating. So for the next 4 years, I spent about half of the time during the summers injured. Broken collarbone, separated shoulder, knees, ankles, broken wrist. It just a crazy amount of abuse to the body. And I remember in my 12th grade of school, when it kind of dawned on me, I'm not going to become a professional motocross racer. I was racing at the expert and pro level at my local races, but I was nowhere near the top. And I remember I was working 3 jobs, and I was just putting all this time trying to get as much money as I could. And at the sacrifice of my schooling, I had terrible marks when I was in the 12th grade. Things started going downhill. My parents were struggling with their marriage, and they ended up separating for a period of time. The girl who I was dating at the time, who was my first love, she She just dumped me. And all the universities I applied for, they all rejected me. I said, wow, this is not good. And so I thought to myself, am I going to cry about this, or am I going to do something about it? And at that point I realized I had time. And I had high school if I wanted to go back, so that's what I did. I went back to high school for an extra year. I didn't have any friends because I was the oldest person. And so I focused on my studies. And I ended up pulling my marks up high enough to get a scholarship to go to university. And so when I went to university, I studied automotive and vehicle engineering. And I thought to myself, if I can't be a racer, if I can't race motocross bikes, then I'm going to be on a race team. And I'm going to help make the technology better and help make the vehicles better. And so that's what I did. I dreamed about becoming on a race team. And so through my university experience, I was in engineering, which had a total female population of 0. And I decided, well, why not join the cheerleading team? Of course. And so I joined the cheerleading team, and as if motocross racing wasn't hard enough on the body, cheerleading destroyed me. And so I remember at this one point when I had chronic back pain, and I got an x-ray done by my chiropractor, and she was like, see right here, this is where your spinal columns are grinding bone on bone. That means the disc is completely degenerated. You're probably looking into surgery. I thought, oh my God, does this mean I can't ride dirt bikes anymore? And she said, you're riding dirt bikes still? And it was at that point where I said to slow down a little bit. And a massage therapist had recommended, why don't you try doing yoga or something? And I was like, sure. I mean, female population's there too, right? So that was my exposure, and I ended up doing these yoga classes, and I got more and more involved. And after about 8 months, I noticed my back was not hurting, but what was much more pronounced was that I wasn't mad, I wasn't angry. My mood was generally lifted, and it totally changed my life. But it was expensive, and I thought, how am I going to justify spending $130 a month paying for yoga classes? And I was like, I'll just be a teacher, why not? And I was trying to find what was the best way to become a yoga teacher. And I looked $4,000 to become a teacher in Canada, $3,000 in the States, India, $1,100. What? So I decided, why not go to India then? That's where the whole thing started anyways, right? What an idea that was. So I ended up getting on a plane in my final summer of university, and I thought, well, I'm flying right over England, and the most amount of race teams in the world is in England. So I'll stop off in England, I'll drop off all my resumes at these Formula One teams. A couple of them I got kicked out of, Red Bull Formula One in particular, and I tried my best to get a job on a race team. And when I was in India, I continued searching, and I was like, I really want a job on a race team. And little did I know that Subaru Rally Team USA is housed in Colchester, Vermont. And I was on their website, and I found that they had a job posting for assistant engineer. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I noticed that it was posted 7 months earlier. And I was like, probably filled, but why not? I'll try anyway. So they're like, yeah, we haven't filled it yet. And at that point, I was like, then it's mine. And so I said, okay, I'm going to get this job. So long story short, after several 1,000+ mile trips, there and back and forth, there was not any interview set up, but I definitely planned on there being one once I showed up. And while I was writing my final exams in university, I got an email saying, we'd like to have you. And I thought, oh my goodness, first time I'm ever going to move out of my parents' house, I'm going to a different country, and starting my first full-time job, and that's when life kind of began for me. And so it's been about 1 year since I've started work at Vermont Sports Car as assistant engineer, doing design work, and it's been a dream. It's been absolutely amazing. I absolutely love the job. It's been a tremendous blessing, and it's been a blessing knowing that I was able to chase this dream, that I had the support of my parents, and who are now back together, which has been huge for myself, because I'm able to, at first, I had a hard time understanding how relationships work, and I thought, oh, I don't even have a good example of my parents. But when they got back together, I said, that's probably the best example, because how many parents separate and then get back together and are stronger because of it? And so I've had this tremendous amount of blessing from the people that surround me. And so what my goal is now becoming is I really want to speak to high school students and talk about doing what you love to do, and not just getting a job, making money, and continuing in that path, but really like being able to embrace one's passion. And I feel that I was so blessed to be able to do such a thing. And so, as John was mentioning, when I went to High Performance Academy, which was an entrepreneurial venture, he said, join Toastmasters then. And so I said, I don't know what Toastmasters is, but okay, I'll be there. And so on my 25th birthday, I was fortunate enough to join Toastmasters and be amongst you incredible individuals. And so I want to end my speech with a quote from somebody who inspired me greatly. His name is Les Brown. And he says, if you want anything in life, you have to go out and fight for it. You have to work day and night for it. You have to give up your time, your peace, and your sleep for it. And if all that you dream and scheme is about it, and life seems useless and worthless without it, and if you're willing to sweat for it and fret for it and plan for it, and give up all of your terror for the opposition for it, and if you're willing to go out there for that thing that you want with all of your capacity, your strength, your sagacity, your faith, hope, and confidence, and your stern pertinacity, and if you're willing to neglect cold, poverty, famine, gout, sickness or pain of body and brain to go for the thing that you want, then by dog and grim, you beseech and beset it, the help of God you will. Thank you very much.